Hey, what up, guys? It's me again, and welcome to the This Is My Moment podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Mitchell, and here at This Is My Moment, we love to have a good time. We love meeting new people, and we love making you smile. And oh yeah, it's season 2, baby. Let's go get it.
There ain't no stopping it, this is my moment. Join the movement, we bringing people together, bringing positivity, making changes for the better. Cause it's all about
Today, man, I got somebody on the other end of this camera that I think I'm gonna enjoy talking to. Let's see what shake. Introduce yourself to the family.
Hi, Patrick. Nice to be here. My name is Scott DuPont. I'm a professional storyteller, now living in Hollywood, California. Started out years ago as an actor, became a producer. In the past, I would say 3 or 4 years, I've been helping people finance their movies because I believe everybody has a story to tell. And if you can know the ways to navigate and fundraise, anybody can tell the story. Maybe this might be your moment.
Hey, don't get too deep because I'm gonna ask some questions. I got a great story. I might need some help after the show.
Everybody has a story.
I'm researching you, right, Scott? And I'm reading up on you, and it says 30 years ago, you envisioned doing something that you loved, and you're doing it. What did you envision 30 years ago? I don't know how old you are. I'm 46. If you're close to my age, 30 years ago puts you as a teenager-ish, you don't really know what you want. You're still a fireman or a police officer. What did you vision 30 years ago, man, that you're doing now?
Well, I appreciate that, Patrick. I'm a lot older than I look. I was probably in
Good
my
for you.
late 20s then. And
Okay.
I remember the moment vividly. I was at a live Tony Robbins event. And towards the end of the first night, after we had walked across 2,000-degree hot coals, he had a goal setting workshop. And I still have the booklet where for about half an hour, close to 45 minutes, I wrote down what I dreamed for my life. And
Yeah.
Tony was instructing us to do is when you're dreaming, don't put limits. Don't worry about how you're going to get there. So my wildest, craziest dreams, I just got in this moment. I said, you know what? I had just come out of 2 bankruptcies. A couple of businesses failed. I went through some tough times. I said, I know myself. I'm a I'm a workaholic, should say, and I'm learning to balance myself out now to enjoy life more, laugh a little bit more. But when I went into that workshop, it's like, well, I know I'm going to work hard. What would if I could do anything in the world? What would I want to do? And literally, I wrote down, I'll be a professional actor. I'll be making movies with some of the biggest movie stars in the world. I would have the woman of my dreams. I was single for God knows how many decades. I'd be living in Hollywood, California. And here we are. It all came true.
Man, say man. You wrote it down and talked it into existence, huh?
Yep. Now let me connect the dots real quick.
Go ahead.
It all came with, once you have these goals, it came with focus, looking at the goals on a daily basis, and doing the work. So nothing is easy, but anything can be accomplished if you have a great goal and a reason why.
Yeah, and you know what? Everyone says, "What's your why?" Like it's a thing, and it's huge, and you got to have a reason to to get up in the morning and go grind it out.
Oh, I've got a why, believe me.
You got a why?
Yeah.
Okay, you mind sharing what's your why?
A couple of years ago, I was working on a TV show called Rizzoli and Isles. It was a hit show on TNT with Angie Harmon. And I was one of about 15 detectives that worked on a regular basis on the show in the police department there. And I worked 5 out of the 7 seasons, and I got to know this group of 15 other detectives and police officers. We became very, very close friends. And one of them had one of the most unbelievable scripts you've ever seen.
Yeah.
And he tried to pitch it to all the studios, and Sony turned him down. He couldn't get into Universal Studios, Columbia Picture, all these studios. I said, Bob, why don't you just do it on a lower budget, which you can do these days? Forget a studio giving you 10 or $20 million. Just do it for under $1 million, get the money and do it yourself. And he was convinced on doing that. We're all supportive. We were cheerleading him. And I come into work one day on Monday after a weekend, and the second assistant director said, hey, guys, don't get breakfast yet. Just stay here. I've got an announcement to make. Bob committed suicide. Not only was the suicide extremely tragic, losing somebody that you're friends with, and that was just devastating, but my why, the why came out of, here's one of the greatest stories that'll never be told. It's going to end up at Hollywood Forever Cemetery. Okay. And you don't have to live in Hollywood. You can have the most amazing story or just an idea for a documentary. And if people don't get to tell their stories, which thank God we're connected through the internet, billions of people can watch your movie. If look at The Sound of Freedom. It's a great example. What a tragedy that would be. So that's my why, is helping other people get their projects financed and navigating that whole process, which I believe God gave me a gift. I believe we're all unique individuals. And maybe my gift, after slugging it out for 25 years in the trenches, financing all these movies behind me on the wall, 24 of them, maybe my gift is to help other people. Because I'm not the only guy with great stories. There's anybody listening to your podcast right now could have an amazing story.
Yeah, the guy on the other end of this thing got an amazing story. Let me ask you this here. So this is not in the script that I sent you, the questions. So all those photos behind you, those are movies you produced?
Correct.
Oh, man, that's solid.
I just learned a system. Part of the system, part of getting to that system was learning from people that are older and wiser than me. To fast track, because life is very short. And I started doing what they told me to do, adapted. And, I've always built a great team around me, bringing in another producer who has more skill, bringing in a great talented director. And if you have all those elements, you can do an amazing movie for between $200,000 all the way up to $1 million that Netflix could pick up, that could be seen in a theater. I mean, the sky is the limit these days.
That's crazy. You said something that I want to touch on a little bit about time. You never know how much time it is. Life is short. I want to talk to me about what happened to you in 2008. I was researching. You said that your life had came crashing down. And I want to talk about that because I want to talk about your resiliency, your bankruptcy. Like, it takes a strong person to follow their dreams when they ain't got no money.
Yeah, this was beyond money. So this was actually after the bankruptcies. Okay. I had bounced back, and 2008, I had been acting and making movies successfully for about 9 or 10 years.
Yeah.
And living in Orlando, Florida, three unique things happened that fall. We had just come out of 3 hurricanes that crisscrossed the state of Florida the fall of 2008. What's very, very unusual is they usually don't come all the way into the center of the state. Normally they'll hit the coast. Right. And it'll be a lot of rain and flooding in Orlando. This is like 120-mile-an-hour winds. All 3 of these hurricanes ripped off trees, ripped off roofs of houses to shut everything down. So it was devastating. The second thing was Florida was not able to renew their film and television incentives, which the whole industry depended on. And then the third thing that happened was the Great Recession. The housing bubble burst. Mm-hmm. So here I am. And remember, I was, no matter where you are in the profession, whether you're an actor, producer, there's always ups and downs. Yeah. Always. Now your up and down might be a $10,000 or $20,000 a month swing. When you're starting out, it might be a $2,000 swing. So here I am, I'm swinging all the way down because my agent called me, said, hey, I'm going out of business. Universal Studios, where I had an office, they notified us that all of the soundstage were turning dark. They were cutting the power to all the stages, and they're going to bring in all the theme park attraction stuff to be stored because of the hurricane threat. And nobody was shooting anything. I couldn't raise any, so there was no acting because they wouldn't even issue insurance permits to film until later that, I think November 1st. So nothing is shooting. The roads were still full with trees and debris. I was kind of landlocked in my neighborhood for 2 weeks. I had no money, and beyond that, I had rent coming up in 25 days, and I knew I only had one option, was to get the hell out of Dodge ASAP, because if you can't act, if you can't produce, maybe I shouldn't be in Florida. Maybe I should go to Hollywood.
Yes.
So I called all of my investors that invested in previous films, and I couldn't shoot a film. So I wasn't calling them up to invest in a film. I was calling up just to borrow money. Couldn't go to any of my family members because a lot of them were invested in a film that hadn't paid out yet. So I was in hock up to my eyeballs, and some of my best friends says, hey, I'd love to help you out, but I just lost like $500,000 in real estate. I don't know if you know, but we're in a real estate depression. So everybody was hurting. Okay. And they may or may not have had food stamps back then in Florida. I didn't know how to navigate that, but I was literally like eating the last of my rice and beans. I got to figure out how to pay rent and how to get a small U-Haul trailer and like $500 in gas money just to get to Hollywood. If I had to sleep in my car for a few weeks, everyone's done that at some time in their life. I can deal with that, but I gotta get out of Florida so I can work. So what I did is crazy idea. And let me preface this by saying I didn't actually sell my body parts, but what I did is I created a company called Scott DuPont Inc. So I had a production company.
Right.
This company, Scott DuPont Inc., was set up for the purpose where if I could go through my Rolodex of friends, family, associates, anybody that I knew, I was willing to offer them a gross percentage of all my future acting revenues, my film producing revenues, any books that I've written or so I already had a little bit of income coming in, but this was all future projects for the rest of my life. And I created this business plan where if you, for example, I had this full body shot that I had done a magazine ad the year before, kind of a cool like photo shoot. And I believe I sold a hand for $7,500. I sold a whole arm for $25,000. I sold a leg for $50,000. I sold a heart for $75,000. So my goal was to try to get about $25,000 to pay off some debts because I hadn't worked for 3 months. That's what got me in the jam. I had to pay back a couple loans. I had to pay my landlord. Had to put $500 in gas in my tank. And it'd be nice if I had a couple $1,000 just to get an apartment or at least to have food for the first month in Los Angeles. I put together a business plan about selling my body parts for an investment instead of a film, which creates residuals for years and years and years. Right. This Scott DuPont plan would be to find anyone in the world who believed in me and believed that I had the future earning potential where they could make money back. Okay. So I started sending emails out for these business plans. To like 200 people the first day, nothing, crickets. 500 people the next day. By the end of the first week, it was like 700 people. I forget when it was, but it was within a few days. I got a first reply from a longtime buddy of mine named Charles saying, hey, I'm in. I'm going to buy a hand or an arm. I forget what he bought. Another guy ended up buying another body part. I ended up getting about $25,000 from these two guys, Charles and John. I am forever and will ever be indebted to those guys. And for the past 15 plus years,
Yeah.
Every single quarter, I write them residual checks from my acting revenue, my producing revenue, anything related in the entertainment. They get a small piece of that for the rest of my life. So it turned out to be a really great investment. And I really enjoy writing those checks at these two individuals who saved my life.
Man, that's an amazing story, man. It's funny because I'm looking at it, and I'm glad you clarified it, because when you said selling your body parts, and when I was like, wait a minute, I'm finna ask this guy how you did this. But man, that's actually good sense. And that leads into my next question. You said anyone can make it out if they're resourceful. Talk to me. Talk to me about being resourceful. Now, you've told me you sold your body parts, right? But that's only a small part of it, man, because you had to understand where you were at and where you wanted to be to get this, man. And I think knowing where you want, knowing what the final goal is, adds or subtracts from that resourcefulness. What do you think, man?
So I learned this skill from Tony Robbins many, many years ago. Also the chicken soup for the Jack Canfield also showed me this. So life is going to hit you at certain points, whether it's going to be a death of the closest person you love, it's going to be a bankruptcy. It could be my situation where the whole state of Florida was shut down for 6 months. There's no productions. My agent called. He's shutting down his doors. Universal Studios, they literally kicked us out. You're going to run into situations like that, and your mind is always asking questions. You can be running around the house in the middle of the day. You can be driving a car. Your mind is always working. So the questions that came up, it's like, why me? Why am I in this position? How can I get out of it? It's like you're asking the wrong questions.
Yeah.
So you need to train your brain. And what I started doing for the first couple of days after my pity party, because I was like beyond, like I had no idea what was going to. It's like, okay. So I started asking, so what is great about this situation?
Yeah.
And of course, my brain says nothing. Your roof is still leaking, and you don't have a job. No one will pick up the phone. Everyone else is going bankrupt or losing their houses in the real estate market because Florida got hit really hard. Then you ask your brain another question: what could be great about this? Okay, then you go to a third question: what could be a lesson about all this? Yeah. So when I started asking different questions, I got the answer. It's like, well, maybe this is a sign that I've done as much as I can do in Florida in the entertainment business. And maybe this is pushing me to finally move out to Hollywood full time.
Yeah.
Then I started asking questions. How can I get to California? How can I get out of this mess? What resources do I have? And just by asking those questions for 2 or 3 days, I remembered that silly phrase, oh, it'll cost you an arm and a leg. When people are really in a bad place and they can't afford to buy the car on the lot or groceries, or they can't pay for that steak dinner.
Yeah.
So that was the first start of getting resourceful. It's like, okay, maybe I'll use that for my opening header in my email.
Yeah.
And maybe I can hypothetically, in theory, sell body parts, because that's really the only asset I had. I couldn't create another film project. I didn't have any acting jobs. So maybe I can attract people out there to invest in a guy who believed in himself and that saw a bright future. And like they said, these guys, Charles and John, they changed my life forever.
That's what's up, man. And you know what? It's funny how many friends you have when you need them, right? Yeah, exactly. My next question is this. So you started acting, what you said, around 28 or so, give or take?
Yeah, it's like mid to late 20s.
What was the biggest misconception that you had when you started acting and producing, when you got into the business? What was the biggest misconception that you had about it?
So the biggest misconception, I actually just kind of did it in a lark. I was going to graduate school and I saw this little ad. Hey, want to take some acting classes? And I was like, I always wonder what it'd be like to be an actor, whatever. But in the acting class, our teacher, Orlando, Florida, is a very, very commercial market. They get some big studio films that come through time to time. During the 90s and 2000s, they had a couple of networks like Nickelodeon, A&E, set up shop down there. But most of the acting business was commercials, corporate videos, industrial videos, print shoots, theme park commercials. And I'm in this acting class, and the teacher goes, oh, yeah, and Chris Hurt and Shauna Bartel, they just booked this, and this is how they make X amount of money per year doing nothing but acting. And I was like, because I always thought, hey, if you're an actor, you might get 1 or 2 acting jobs a year, maybe a film here, a film there. These guys were working like every other day on a commercial or corporate training. Now, it's not glamorous to sit down in front of the camera for 15 minutes and do a corporate training video or do a voiceover for a book or be an extra in a movie. But you add up all those things, it's like, wow, I can actually make a living doing this. So that's how I actually got into the acting business. I saw that if you focused on where you could make the money, everyone wants to do movies. Okay, that's not really the promised land. But a balance of different things, you can hustle. And I was a full-time working actor within 6 months.
Man, you know what? I'm listening to you, right? And I thought about taking acting classes and all that. You, to me, seems like a young man that's not scared to grind, not scared to think outside of the box, man. That, to me, is amazing. And that, to me, shows resiliency. That, to me, shows that concept that we need to make it in life. How important do you think it is to have thick skin, to have the ability to take those licks, right? And not just say, you know what, screw my dream, I'll just go get a regular 9 to 5. You know what I mean? Like, how important is it to you to have thick skin and the ability to bounce and catapult forward even in the time of desperation?
I think it's probably the most important thing in your life. Fear, false evidence appearing real, can hold back everyone. So I learned from one of my mentors a great question to ask if the worst thing were to happen. So let's say you tried something and you completely failed and you lost like $2,000 or whatever. You lost all your rent money. Whatever the situation is, it's the worst thing that can happen. A great question to ask, getting back to the questions, what is this going to mean to me 10 years from now?
Yeah.
What is this going to mean for me 10 years from now? And I started reading tons and tons of books as a kid. I read lots of books. I should be reading a lot more. I just get sidetracked. And in all the books, I used to gobble up biographies of successful people because I want to learn what they did. And all the successful people, they look at fear or failure, actually, as a learning process. Like failures are a gift because, okay, I'm glad I failed there because I just saved like 5 years not doing that all the time. I'm going to move over here.
Yeah.
So that's what I do. I love on my podcast and just when I run into friends out on the street, they ask me, hey, can you give me a few tips on how to finance my movie? Because I know you're really good at it. It's like, I'll stop for half an hour and give them a few bits of advice because I've made all those mistakes. Why not tell people the shortcut and get there super, super fast?
That's what's up. And you must be reading my mind, man, because we segue right into my next question, man. We said it at the beginning. Every person, everyone has a story. Everyone has a story. And you have found a way to help us make those stories into reality. And that's what you just said, 30 minutes of your time, just chopping it up with people, helping them. You're talking to Patrick. I have a great story. I want to work on getting finance. What do you tell me?
I used to like I'm like you, Patrick. You're doing this show out of the goodness of your heart.
Yeah.
You're trying to share with people. You're trying to give life lessons. I'm the same way. So before the pandemic, I would literally like I talked to people for like 2 or 3 hours, and then like my phone will ring. It's like, hey, you're doing this meeting. Like, come on. So I created this podcast basically to share everything I know and everything
Yeah.
I've learned over 25 years of fundraising independent films. It's on a free podcast. I don't even have any commercials. It's at financeyourmovie.com. But just a couple of elements on a very, very high level, like just in a few minutes. You need to start with a killer business plan. So you either have it all starts with a story.
Yeah.
Okay. There's no sense even trying to make a movie unless you have a great script or a really great concept, like an outline for a documentary feature. So whether it's a traditional feature-length narrative or a feature-length documentary, start with a great story. Then you build out a business plan, your budget, how you're going to shoot it. In the business plan, you want to include the team. Now, when I was first starting out in 1998, I didn't know what I was doing. So I brought in an experienced producer with some gray hair, that's what we call it, somebody wiser and older than me, a guy named Tracy Frankel. I'm still friends with Tracy. And having Tracy in our business plan was invaluable. And then with this really great business plan, a killer script, we were able to raise $1 million, just over $1 million back in 1998, which would really be the equivalent of like 1.5 million today. Now, here's the beautiful part. Here's the best part for your audience. Back in 1998, to be taken seriously, we had to shoot on 35 millimeter film with 2 or 3 of these great Panavision cameras. And it's a whole different thing. The technology of the cameras, the editing software, the LED lights that don't even need to be plugged in anymore. You can make a movie for 30 cents on the dollar 20 years ago. So even just 200,000, 500,000, you can make an incredible story come to life. I mean, you might have heard of the film Tangerine. It was the first movie ever shot on an iPhone.
Yeah.
Right? So there's no excuses if you have a great story not to make it. And here's like, I could go on and on. This really is a filmmaker's renaissance.
Yeah.
So 1998, we really only had one major option to get money back for our investors. The reason we shot on 35 millimeter film, we wanted the film to look cinematic and as good as possible. We had to get a theatrical deal, or the only other option is to get one of the 5 major distributors to do what was called a pipeline deal. So you go into Walmart, you go into Kmart, you go into Target, you go into Blockbuster video stores, and there's only 5 of the major distributors that could output. Our first pressing of DVDs was 400,000 units. Okay. Now you don't have that burden. You can go to any of these different streaming platforms. Doesn't matter if your film doesn't go to theaters. You can make money back. Let
me ask you this, and then I'm gonna get ready to close. Do you think you would be further along doing it the way you did it today, like having those platforms without having to worry about the units, without having to worry about having the accessibility to the internet? Do you look at that like, man, imagine what we could have did if we would have had this back then? Does that run through is that a thought that you have? Because I look at just like recruiting for athletes, right? When I graduated high school, we didn't have all this Wi-Fi and all this social media stuff. So I'm wondering if that's the same kind of thing that goes through your mind, like, man, I wish we would have had this back then, guys. We would have been like, I wouldn't have had to sell an arm and a leg.
Everything happens for a reason. And all the failures that I had, all the hardships, all the extra money we had to raise back in the day, it taught me a lot of valuable lessons.
Yeah.
But if I had the technologies today Like literally, I starred in 2 films during the pandemic that were literally shot on iPhone. So it wasn't just the Tangerine movie. More and more filmmakers are shooting on like, they're just doing micro budget projects.
Yeah.
If I had had these technologies, both software and hardware, I probably would have had 40 plus movies that I had made instead of 20 plus.
Yeah.
I would have been farther ahead in terms of the quantity of movies. Absolutely. But you know, it's all part of life lessons. I have no regrets.
That's good, man. Hey, Scott, so this is what we like to do. At the end of every show, I play a game. It's called Pick One. Oh, yeah, get ready for it, brother. So it's called Pick One. I'm going to give you 2 options. You have to choose. I'm not going to throw you under the bus. It's nothing like that. It's just to have a little fun with you. You ready?
Ready.
First question, acting or producing?
That's a tough one. I would probably say acting, because I don't have to raise money and prep for 6 months.
Okay, too easy, too easy. You have one piece of advice to give someone. What do you give them? 1 sentence of advice.
The best advice I would suggest to everybody watching or listening is, whatever you want to do, if you're a content creator, if you're making YouTube videos or TikTok videos and you want to make a feature-length movie, find someone else who is already making movies successfully and talk to them, reach out to them, find out what they're doing, so you don't try to figure out all the steps that they spent 5-10 years doing before you. So get a mentor, get advice from people who are doing what you want to do.
There it is. Last one. I give you the phrase, "This is my moment." What's the first thing comes to your mind?
This is your moment. If you're, you know, even if you're just playing around in your backyard doing TikTok videos, you're making short YouTube videos, this is your moment. This is a filmmaker's renaissance.
Scott, we are done. Thank you very much for being here. I'm going to close out the show. Don't go anywhere.
My pleasure. And everyone's information, just go to Finance Your Movie. That's my podcast on all the platforms. Or you can see a documentary that I made for free called Movie Money Confidential, which is a documentary about how people raise money for their movies. Go to moviemoney.com.
Hey, guys, here's the deal. Scott said it. What is great about your situation? Stop looking at the negative. Start looking at the positive. See what you can get out of your situation to help you grow and be a better person. Period. And then at the end of the day, go get it!
Changes for the better, cause it's all about growth, all about success. We wanna see you rise, wanna see you at your best. Hey, keep it rolling, we gotta keep going. There ain't no stopping it, this is my moment. Let's go.